So in this next slide, I really go over some of the different techniques that we have for discovering and mainly classifying sensitive data. And I look at a high level 3 different categories, and I think they've all got their own strengths and they've all got their own drawbacks. So I'd say the first one and the typical method that I see with firms looking to start out with classification is, well, let's just let our IT guys do it. And that's fine, but the main challenge with this approach is that the IT staff really have no idea what the value of their business data is, who created it, what's in it. They also don't have the time, so typically what they wind up doing is they'll do some pretty obvious stuff like, oh, we'll tag the CEO's file server, or maybe anything tying to HR finance. We'll tag anything on those servers as sensitive, and that's pretty much as far as they go. Obviously, that leaves a lot of data unclassified, and it's often typically not very accurate. So again, not necessarily the best way to go about it, but in some ways it's a way a lot of firms get started. The other method, and probably the most common one I'd say overall in recent years, has been user-driven classification, often called manual classification. And as the name implies, basically, this uses the help of your employees to actually classify your data, either by tagging the data as they create it, whether it's they're drafting an email or a Word document, or you're forcing users to choose some sort of a classification level. Say, for example, before they send an email, they have to click on a classification level before they can go out. Now, the obvious benefit of user-driven classification is that the users are much closer to their own data. So they have a better understanding of what value it has and what might be sensitive, what have you. If you take the case of DLP tools, or even some ways of doing like a regex search, it can be fairly straightforward to find things like credit card numbers or social security numbers if you know what you're looking at, 3-digit, hyphen 2-digit, hyphen 4 digits. That's fairly trivial to find with basic pattern matching. But things like intellectual property, trading algorithms, maybe seismic images if you're an energy firm, those types of things tend to be a lot more difficult to identify, and that's where user-based classification can be a lot more helpful if you're looking to do more than just check off compliance boxes. The main drawback and the main complaint we hear with user-driven classification is, you have to do it in a way that doesn't create unnecessary burdens on your users. It doesn't interfere with their workflows, because if it's too intrusive, your users are going to just look for ways to get around it, right? They're going to click on the first thing in the drop-down that they have to just to make sure the email gets out, and they're really not going to think a lot about it. So that's the drawback, and actually we've seen some efforts to get around this. Certainly efforts to make user-based classification is either part of an overall user security awareness training program. We've even seen some gamification techniques where firms have tried to turn this into contests and have champions and what have you to get your users on board and make it fun, and also give them a vested interest and a motivation for wanting to do this. The last one I talk about, and one I think is starting to gain more traction, become more popular, is automated classification. And automated classification methods tend to use things like context, whether who's accessing this file, or who's created it, or where's the file located, who's been accessing it, things like that, time of day. And then we're also seeing more use of things like machine learning and natural language processing to analyze the context, but also the content of the files, but most importantly with minimal interaction from users. And obviously one of the main benefits, automated classification can work in the background, not impact your users or their workflows, or it can also be used to complement user-based classification schemes, maybe to help, if maybe they overlook something, it can be a reminder, say, hey, did you really mean to do this? This looks potentially sensitive, you want to recheck this, or what have you. One minor drawback to automated classification schemes, they don't necessarily help with user awareness if that's a big initiative internally. Not necessarily also as accurate as user-based, but again, I think as we see machine learning and natural language processing get better and better, I think the accuracy of automated classification techniques are going to get better as well.